Hey everyone, my name's Stick. Welcome to the first ever episode of Boardies. Today I want to talk to you about Jeremiah 29:11. I'm sure you've seen this verse floating around out there somewhere. For many people, it's a source of inspiration because they believe God's promising to give them a great life right now. For others, it's a classic example of taking a verse out of context, and so it really doesn't apply to any of us nowadays. So who's right? Does Jeremiah 29:11 apply to you? Well, let's take a look. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." On the surface, it sounds like God is making this promise to you. But look at what the verse that comes before it says. "When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will visit you, and I will fulfill to you my promise, and bring you back to this place." Okay, maybe God isn't making this promise to any of us after all. So who's he talking to then? Well, God made this promise to Israel right before a mighty nation called Babylon forced many of their people into exile over 2,500 years ago. But in Jeremiah 29:10, God promised that as soon as 70 years of that exile are up, Israel gets to go home. And guess what? That's exactly what happened 70 years later. Our verse, Jeremiah 29:11, follows this up with God's plans for Israel after exile. Plans for welfare, a future, and a hope. So, does Jeremiah 29:11 apply to you? Doesn't seem like it, does it? But that's not the whole story. You see, there's a whole book in the New Testament that comments on Jeremiah 29:11, and it's called the letter of 1 Peter. Right out of the gate, the Apostle Peter dubs the Christian recipients as exiles, because this world isn't their real home anymore. And then when he wraps up the letter, Peter compares Rome, the capital of the world in his time, with Babylon, the capital of the world at the time of Israel's exile. And so Peter makes an obvious comparison between what life is like for Christians in this age and what it was like for Israel during its exile. But here's where things get interesting. Just as God promised Israel welfare, a future, and a hope in Jeremiah 29:11, in 1 Peter, God also promises Christians, you ready for this? Welfare, a future, and a hope. Let me show you what I mean. Welfare in Jeremiah 29:11 really means peace, and peace bookends the letter of 1 Peter, just like exiles in Babylon do. Chapter 1 verse 2, "May grace and peace be multiplied to you." Chapter 5 verse 14, "Peace to all of you who are in Christ." Future in Jeremiah 29:11 really means end or last, as in the end times or the last times. 1 Peter 4:7 proclaims, "The end of all things is at hand." And 1 Peter 1:5 promises, "Our salvation is ready to be revealed in the last time." Hope in Jeremiah 29:11 really means, well, hope. But hope just happens to be the main theme of 1 Peter. Chapter 1, verse 3, "God has caused us to be born again to a living hope." Verse 13, "Set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ." So although Jeremiah 29:11 isn't a direct promise to you and me, it lays the groundwork for a bigger and better promise. It reminds all believers everywhere that our life of exile is coming to an end and a wonderful eternity awaits. Jeremiah 29:11 does apply to you, Christian, by anticipating a longer welfare, a better future, and a brighter hope.